Welcome back to the Church Resource, where we talk about all the best resources for churches, leaders, and lay people. I'm Lucas Pinckard, and I am here always with the doctor,
What's up?
Chris Respass. What's
Hey,
going on, man? How you been?
I'm good, man.
What color is that shirt?
Vermilion.
Whoa.
I have no idea. I don't know. Salmon.
I can't
Coral.
spell. Like, I'm trying to visualize how to spell vermilion right now, and I got nothing.
I'm probably like 9 shades away from that. I don't know what color
That's a
this
handsome
is.
shirt. And we had a conversation in your office a while back about how there's just some colors I can't wear.
You can rock this.
No, I couldn't.
Yeah.
I would lose all the respect of my peers and mentors.
Oh, my goodness.
We were having a conversation right prior to this. I'm just going to throw it out there. When do you fire somebody?
Honestly,
this
tomorrow.
This is a tough conversation, right?
It is.
So one of the things we've talked about, I've had the opportunity to work with some of the guys that over at Echelon Front, the guys who wrote the book Extreme Ownership, and this is a conversation we've had with them quite a bit, is when to fire somebody. And the question that they come up with, or the answer that they come up with, is when you've tried everything else and when you don't care anymore. And that struck me because, like, as a pastor, I always care.
Right.
That there's not a point where I don't care anymore. And yet, on the occasions when I've had to fire somebody, it's because I don't care.
Yeah.
I want to be like, no, I'm way too sanctified to end up in that category. But the truth of the matter is, like, that's exactly what happens. And sometimes you have to fire staff members.
Yes.
But sometimes you have to fire volunteers.
Indeed.
And those are difficult things. So but first off, like, how does that phrase or that answer catch you when you don't care anymore? Right? How do you process that the first time you hear it?
Yeah, so it rubs you the wrong way, right? Because it makes it seem like you're heartless and you have no regard for other people's feelings or their station in life, what it is that they're going through. And let me just be the bad guy for a minute.
I'll allow it.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Then that means you ought to be doing your job. Mm-hmm. Right, like if all this stuff is true, I got a family. Okay, then you should be the most motivated person, in this conversation 100%. To do your stuff. Okay, now so let me come back. But it strikes you wrong. But the truth is, by the time you get to that point, you don't care. It's not that you don't have any emotional, connection to the volunteer or the employee. We don't want to hurt anybody, but, at that point, the mission and the resources, whether that be money or time, they're coming into conflict with this person that's supposed to be, an asset, and it's proven to be an enduring liability. It's tough.
Yeah. One of the things I always think about is, like, have I really tried everything else? And that's a tough, thing, because there's factors of motivation that are part of it. There are some things that have to do with, obviously, performance indicators, right?
Sure.
And we do some performance reviews. And, when we're talking about those things, we'll talk, I'll ask some open-ended questions. Do you think you deserve a raise or promotion? Do you feel like you're accomplishing your goals? What things do you think I'm doing that are holding you back, right? Or that the organization is doing that are holding you back? If I was in a secular corporation, which is something that I've been a part of in my life before. And so, like, those types of things give some indicators of what that is, and whether you're doing those things annually or maybe semi-annually. They're really helpful. But, man, when you've got somebody that's consistently underperforming, then evaluating whether or not you've done everything that you can do. In my case in particular, it reveals to me the holes that I have in my leadership, not just when it comes to this person as an individual, but when it comes to, like, across the board. And we've kind of talked about sort of the tenets of leadership and what those things look like. And one of the things that happens often for me is I've got somebody that's underperforming, and so I'll talk to them about about that in particular. Right. And what it comes down to is that like I've given them too much leeway.
Yeah.
And that they don't actually know what my intent is. Right? That, I gave them a project. I'm like, hey, here, I need you to do this. Take it and run with it, do whatever you want. But I didn't communicate to them enough about the parameters or what my expectations were or what the expectations are for this particular project or position, why we're doing it that way. And so they're not underperforming in my case. They're not underperforming as much as they are aimless because I didn't communicate well enough, or my instructions were too convoluted. I wasn't simple, clear, and concise in order to, communicate what that was. And that whenever I gave them a responsibility, what I thought I was doing was delegating. But in fact, I was just kind of sending somebody into the woods with a compass and being like, hey, make it to the store. And then not giving them any directions of where the store was, right? Yeah. Make it to safety and do your best. And so that evaluation has really helped me a lot. And it's not just prevented me from making poor decisions with personnel, but it's really helped to improve those relationships because I'm realizing like, hey, you know what? I actually am the problem with this. It's not that you don't know how to do this, it's that you weren't given enough information on what to do. So that tends to be it with me. And having gone through this a couple of times now, I'm able to recognize, hey, you know what? Like, this is it. Hey, why don't we're starting this ministry. I want you to kind of take it and run with it. Like, all right, great. I'd love to, or somebody comes to you with the idea, right? We talked about the good idea fair, right?
You're right.
And this happened a few years ago where we had a guy who was like, hey, we really need a men's ministry. I'm like, cool, man. If you want to, kind of take the reins on that, then let's go for it. And expecting to hear nothing back. And yet here we go. A couple of months later, he's like, all right, the other guys in the church really want a men's ministry. I'm willing to do this and kind of help with this particular Bible study that I picked out and go and cool. And so they get about halfway through the Bible study and they're like, well, why are we doing this? And it was one of those that, I gave him free rein to do it. He wanted it because he knew that the men in our church needed fellowship. But at the end of the day, there was no purpose. There was no intent behind it. I hadn't helped him build any of those things. And so, we're halfway through our first semester of doing men's ministry, and now we've got to kind of rebuild. And we had some guys that left because they felt like, well, maybe I don't like this study, or I'm not getting out of it what I thought I was, or, I went to because I wanted to see what men's ministry was all about. And it turns out we don't really know what we're all about. And then, we're sort of fighting this uphill battle of getting people back, where if I would have just invested a little bit of time, and ends up saving all of that. And, on the back end, when I started to do that, our relationship between me and that guy really began to grow. The relationship with the other men that were involved in it really began to grow, and those types of things. I was ready to pull the plug on it because I saw that it was flopping after, 9 weeks.
Yeah.
I was like, no, well, hey, we tried it. And it turns out that really, the issue is me, and not this guy who's doing that. And I had the ability to crush one of our volunteers who did exactly what I asked him to do, right? Hey, if you want to do this, like, take it, run with it. And he did it. But because I didn't give enough support, and then that ended up, especially pre-COVID, ended up being like one of the anchor ministries that we had. And that group of guys, all the ones that left ended up coming back. And our men's group ended up being like 20 or 25, and there were more guys coming to the men's group than there were ladies that were coming to the women's group. Okay, which is a rarity.
It is. That's a diamond in the rough. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we got about halfway through the Bible study, and then we kind of kicked it to them. We're like, hey, this is what we want to do. This is what we think it ought to be. And they're like, yeah, cool. So what do you guys want to talk about? And they're like, where's the fighting in the Bible? We're like, all right, we're going to Chronicles, we're going to Kings.
Yeah.
And then they all got, really into it. So, for my end, when I've gotten ready to pull the plug, more often than not, I'm realizing that the frustration that I'm having is because I have not communicated well enough what the expectations are, what my intent as the leader was. We talk about commander's intent sometimes.
Sure.
What my intent with the project and the ministry or whatever was. And it's less about them like being aimless and aloof, and more that there was not enough instruction given for them to actually have a direction to run with. So Yeah, a little more guidance on my end. In your experience, what are you seeing, on
Yeah,
your side?
probably, a lot of the same. I mean, I think that's probably a function of all of the things that we have to manage in our roles
Right.
in particular. And sometimes I have to remind myself that there are very few people that are directly managing 400 people.
No joke.
I
Yeah.
mean, do you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And so with that, even with good structure, with that, you have a lot of dotted lines, and that creates a situation where you don't always have a lot of time. And so I would say from my standpoint, looking back over those cases where I was extremely frustrated with people, and them underperforming or not performing in the way that I thought that they should be performing.
Yeah.
A lot of it did have to do with maybe me not being clear. I think the second thing, clear in terms of the instructions, on a specific project. I think for me, the frustration that I have is we understand the global assignment, right? So
Right.
because we gave a job description, or I kind of said, hey, these are the three things that I want you to really focus on, and I can appreciate there being a need to do better on a specific assignment, but the global mission itself, as it relates to that function, I struggle with that. Like,
Yeah.
if you're the janitor, we're not necessarily talking about how to best clean the urinals, right? But if there's a Cheeto bag in the middle of the hallway, that's
Yeah.
should have been caught on your watch. I'm trying to understand why there's still a Cheeto bag here.
Yeah.
And it's not because I'm too good to pick it up. I pick it up all the time. And I think for me, when I'm fine, as we were saying before, in the pre-show, right? If the novice is out experting the expert, right?
Now you got issues.
Now I got an issue,
Yeah.
right? Like that's not even my wheelhouse, but I'm engaged. I'm attacking the issues like it's my project, right? And so, my word is initiative, right? Like
Right.
not taking the initiative to do things, and maybe not owning what you can own, about the project or the
Right.
overall assignment. That's probably where I have gotten to the place where I am less concerned about, all the emotional stuff and the tangents and the entanglements from life,
Right.
and just like, look, I need to get this done, and you're not helping. That's probably being with me. Where it is with me is that they're just not doing what I know that they can do or sense that they can do. We talked about them doing. They said that they could do, and it's just not happening.
Yeah, that was one of the first things that I was told, or the first pieces of advice that I was given when I entered into the workforce was when you see a job description, just say that you can do it all, because you can just go to Barnes and Nobles and get the For Dummies book
Something
and figure it out, right?
Something.
And there was a part of me that was like, that's incredibly dishonest, right? Like I'm not going to sell somebody this bill of goods necessarily that they're not going to be able to back up. But there was also something to the idea that, like, hey, you know what? I'll figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And there is I want to be cautious about casting broad,
Understood.
painting with a broad brush in terms of like generational things and that kind of stuff. But there is something to the frustration with, and like, you'll Google it when you want to fact check me
Right.
on my stuff.
Right. Oh,
but
come
when it's
on.
something that is
Come on,
like
man.
that your job is dependent upon, like, you're not willing to go to Google in order to figure out something that like
Thank
actually
you.
needs to be done.
Come on.
Yeah, like it's one of those things that there's a lot of those tools of convenience that we use at our convenience, and it's easier to create the excuse of, well, you didn't give me enough information, versus the ownership or the responsibility aspect piece of it that says, hey, I don't have enough information, I need to go get it. And I wonder how much of that is a culture thing.
Yeah.
And I don't mean like culture within like necessarily generations, but like organizational culture.
Yeah, I don't know. I was sitting here thinking. So, my background was really youth ministry as it relates to ministry. Right,
Yeah.
that's where I cut my teeth, man. And in the 5 years that I was in the youth ministry, they went from 100 kids to 500 kids. I had 100 volunteers, right, working in the youth ministry, right. Now watch this. Day one, my pastor friend, one that we know here in the area, he gives me a book. It's called Intro to Youth Ministry. I read the book.
Right.
I did the ministry. 2 books. And I'm not talking about stuff that I taught, but in terms of learning how to do it, 2 books, right? It was Introduction to Youth Ministry by a guy that was a long-time youth guru at Southwestern. Can't think of his name. Drawing blank right now, but you would know his name. And then Purpose-Driven Church, and then there was a companion Purpose-Driven Youth Ministry.
Okay.
Right? Those books is how I did the entire ministry, right? And my point was, I was coming fresh out of law school.
Right.
I didn't know a thing about youth ministry. I didn't even want to deal with children, right? My brain was at a totally different level. And then boom, I just took. So I don't know if it's organizational culture, but I do think it's important, considering how unique ministry is. The number of people, the different types of people, obviously creates a context when you will have unique and diverse issues that they'll have to address ministry wise. In the law, we would say you could distinguish each of these, but being able to work through unique issues or slightly different issues, I mean, is a skill set. So it would be, yes, a skill set. And so it would be great to have a culture where people are expected, to kind of, do your research, do some due diligence, try to hunt it out and figure it out, and let's see what God says on it.
Yeah, there's something. I'm trying to find the Introduction to Youth Ministry.
Yeah,
Amazon says it doesn't exist.
Hold on, I'll find that. What was the guys? Man, listen. What were the camps called from Southwestern Baptist? The youth, not Centrifuge. Oh, I can't think of those.
Wasn't Student Life, was it?
Was it? Oh my! Oh, it's not Black. His last name's not Black. What's that guy's name?
I don't know.
Anyway,
we'll find out.
Yeah.
Y'all can Google it.
Yeah.
Show us your Google skills and put it in the comments.
Yeah, we'll see how you resolve this problem. Yeah.
Yeah, I do think that there's a complication in there when it comes to church ministries. We don't have the hire and fire luxury that you do in the workforce necessarily, and there's also the integrity piece and the grace piece that we wrestle with that you may not within the workforce. But I do think the major thing is throughout our calling and throughout just church work in general, it's imperative that we understand that we're supposed to do everything as unto the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a verse that I've been going back to a lot lately. I probably used it. Oh, here we go. An Introduction to Youth Ministry by Wesley Black.
Mm-hmm.
That's Best Gifts for Dad. Right there is what it says up there at the top. So there's this verse, James 4:17, that says, to know the good, for it is sin for you to know the good and to not do it.
Right.
I have applied that to moral right and wrong my entire life. And it's only within the last few months that I'm realizing that is a message that's written to believers, because that should apply to everything in our life.
Right.
It is sinful for us to know the right thing to do at work and to not do it and to be lazy. It is sinful for us to look at the Great Commission and to ignore it. It is sinful for us as pastors to see someone who is underperforming in an area of ministry or in a volunteering situation and things like that, and to not, it doesn't have to necessarily be a harsh rebuke,
Right.
but to not step out and to try to lead and mentor them, and to get them back on the path instead of letting them flounder. Or in a lot of cases, what we do is the same thing that we've been taught to do in the corporate world, which is to build up, this sort of like list of grievances that we have, and to allow that then to be the case for us to sit down with them and be like, hey, listen, you've been late 15 out of the last 25 weeks. And, it's, because of that, you've been underperforming these things. We don't really know what's going on. We're going to have to let you go, whether that's as a position or as a volunteer or whatever. And so, I've really begun to couple that with, my own ministry and how God's working in my life is, 1 Corinthians 13, we read at weddings, but that's really meant for churches.
Right.
Like that's how we're supposed to interact with one another.
That's right.
This idea that we're keeping a record of wrongs in order to build a case against a volunteer or staff member that we're going to fire really puts us in that situation where now we're the one who is being sinful because we're trying to build up this list of grievances and all those kind of things so that we have grounds to terminate instead of looking at it and taking that little extra time and doing it. All that said, there is a point where you've got to let people go.
Yeah.
And whether that is letting a staff member go or letting a volunteer go, there are points where those things need to happen. And, you can cover it in prayer, and you should cover it in prayer, right?
Right.
So you can cover it. You should cover it in prayer. And there are going to be times where it's amicable.
Right.
We recently had a situation where we were talking to a young lady about her role in ministry and what she'd been doing, and just that, it's obvious that her situation has changed, and her work situation has changed. She's been given more responsibilities at work and those kinds of things, and that, it's we're in a place right now where other people have the opportunity to stand and to step up if she needed to take a step back.
Right.
And that's exactly what she needed. And so, we had prayed about it before having that conversation. We were able to have that conversation, and it was very amicable in the like, hey, you know what? Yeah, I shouldn't be doing this right now. And then she's even in the month since taken a little bit of a further step back because that's what she needed, which is great. And it allows other people to step up and to move into those positions. And so you have those amicable ones, but then you also have the others that are like, hey, listen, this isn't due to a moral failure as far as, they didn't do something that was newsworthy that like now you got all this pressure to let them go. But when it comes down to it, like at the end of the day, you're not doing the things that are necessary in order that the gospel is furthered, that people are allowed the freedom to worship, that you're not being a distraction, and that you're not working to really help us reach people in this area. You seem to be working against that. And so like it's time to go. So that said, when you have to let somebody go,
Right.
how do you, is there a strategy for handling the fallout of removing a staff member? Because it's never easy whenever you have to terminate somebody, especially somebody in a church setting where, there are people who have incredibly deep relationships with one another, and who some of these folks, like their spiritual journeys are going to be tied to these people that, you're now releasing back into the workforce, let's say. Right. For one reason or another. Like, what does that look like?
Even when you're not releasing staff back into the workforce,
right.
Even just something, well, from our perspective, would be as simple as making a change in the organizational structure, who reports to who, or even let me move you from this ministry to another ministry. There's always that backlash. And so, as you and I have discussed in the past, that just kind of goes hand in hand with being the leader, right?
Yeah.
But you have to, we are leading as the under-shepherds of Christ, or if you're in your organization, right, you have delegated authority from your CEO all the way down, right? You're operating delegated authority. But in the case, of the industry that we're in, you brace for it and you make the right decision, right? Because to do right and don't do it right is sin, and doing right doesn't always mean that everybody's gonna like what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right, but
right seems to rarely be popular.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Very, very, very rare. Rarely so. And so, I've had situations where, people didn't like the decisions that I made with respect to the leaders. Some folks left, right? Some people, got upset. For them, it was a moral issue. Looking back, anything that's so moral that you won't go to church no more, right? That probably ain't God's morality, right? And I'm talking about not just where we are, but just anywhere.
Just anywhere, yeah.
That's probably not God. That might be your flesh talking. But people get upset, right? People got upset. They've left. Others kind of went into a space where they didn't want to serve, and eventually came back. And the way that I tried to work through it is not fall prey to the temptation of trying to please everybody, right? Not you naturally think of what the fallout might be, but that cannot stay your hand.
Yeah.
Right? The kids are going to be heartbroken, or the parents are going to, rebel. That cannot be. You cannot factor that into making the decision that you feel like is the right one. And so I resisted that. And what the other thing I did was I made the decision, and then I kept it pushing, right? I kept moving forward. I didn't allow a space to just kind of dwell on it. In the short term, people wanted clarity as to why this move. And this is where it gets kind of sticky. If it's an employee, it's not really these people's business, because this is an employee-employer relationship.
Yeah.
And so there are some privacy concerns that need to be maintained.
Yeah. And there's laws that we still have to obey whenever it comes to that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And they may want to know. Well, if they want to know, they're more than welcome to talk to the one that was released back to the workforce. But it's not our place to answer every question for people. And
particularly when it's not a moral failing.
Absolutely.
Right? Like when it is, we've got to discuss those things, because not just the fallout and stuff from it, but also that there's a trust issue there.
Sure.
That has to be discussed and all of that. But when it's not, when it is purely a quote performance issue where those kind of things happen, not only is it not prudent of us to discuss it, but also, if we do, we put ourselves and the church in jeopardy.
Absolutely.
And it does feel a little sometimes like when those type of things happen, that the person that's let go gets to sling whatever mud they want to and say whatever they want to, and that we just have to shut up and take it.
Yeah. Take it up, turn the other cheek, brother.
Yeah, it's that's a challenge.
Yeah.
For me in particular.
Yeah.
Because I want to get defensive.
That's it. We want to get our lick back.
Yep.
We come from the generation that give me a lick.
Like that's it, back. Right?
Yeah.
And not only is that not the right thing to do in that, but it doesn't help the situation at all. At all. What I found in my cases in those situations, that by saying nothing or saying very little, or saying that, hey, you know what, if you got questions, well, they're saying this and this. It's like, well, if you got specific questions for me, I'll answer them to the best of my ability.
Yeah.
But if not, I really don't have much to say.
Yeah.
That in the end, by handling that with integrity, that more often than not, the people that come back to me and they're like, nah, I ain't got no questions.
Yeah.
I heard what they said, and I buy about, whatever percent. I buy about 60% of it. But, you having the confidence that you made the right call is enough for me to say, hey, you know what, that's it. And that goes a long way. Man, firing people is one of the most difficult and challenging things we have to do. No leader likes doing it.
Nobody.
Right? And particularly in a church setting, it has loads of challenges and complications that go along with it. But remember a couple of things, right? When you no longer care, it's probably time to let that person go, because that means that you have exhausted your investment. Making sure you're surrounding yourself with good people that are honest with you and that will help speak into that person's life is going to be a really important thing as well. doing that little personal inventory, like, have I really tried everything, or am I just frustrated about the things that they're not doing right now?
Yes.
Is going to be another
That's
massive,
huge.
massive game changer, because it's going to change your focus and where your heart is in the situation.
Yeah.
And if you look for the things, like I said, examples from my own life where I didn't give enough explanation, or leaving things a little bit too open-ended. I wasn't simple, clear, and concise with the instructions that I was giving. I actually set them up to fail the expectations that they did not know that I had for them, or had set on them. So, doing those kinds of things. And as always, all of this stuff has to be prayed about more than it is talked about.
Absolutely.
And, you will find in those situations that God, when you are really earnestly praying about that for them, that God's going to take care of that situation.
He will.
More often than not, those people will come to you and say, hey, listen, I need to talk about what's going on. Or, I've been really praying, or been really convicted about, this, that, or the other. Or maybe they finally come to you and they're like, hey, look, I want to do what you're asking for me to do. You haven't given me any direction, and I'm trying my best here, but I don't know what to do. Yeah. And God will open up the door for that if we're earnestly praying for the other person. So, keep those things in mind whenever you have to do it. It is one of the less glamorous sides of ministry, for sure.
That's right.
And of leadership in general.
That's right.
But when we handle it with care, when we handle it with love, when we handle it with grace, God's got the opportunity to be glorified in it. So if we are using our best judgment, leaning on the Holy Spirit to have integrity on our part, God's always going to get glory in the end. That's what matters. And these are good discussions. They're not always the most fun discussions.
They're not.
But they're good for us to have. We hope that you guys have learned a little bit from this. If you have suggestions of topics or resources, books and things you want us to check out, email us at thechurchresource@gmail.com. And until next week, y'all have good give, and we'll see you.
Holla.